1929, well, to begin with, I was born in December 2nd, 1929, and the Second World War began in 1939. And we lived on the coast, on the southern coast, on the English Channel, which is right opposite France. And the war came, and we became a closed town. And what happened was that when you have a closed town, it means no one can come in or go out without being checked. And we had the New Zealand Air Force, and we had the Australians, and they were billeted in the big hotels, the Metropole and the Grand, and they would come out into the street and march and so on in the street. Well, we had a pom-pom at the end of the road, which was to shoot at airplanes when they went over. And so very early on, it was what they called the Battle of Britain, and they would head to London with the Germans, and sometimes they would start to bomb before they got to London. And so we would have a siren. I was in school at the time. I was in a church school, and when the sirens were in class, sirens would go, and we'd run down to the crypt of the church. And so we would gather down there and have our lessons underneath the church. And then when they were clear, then we came back. Well, you can imagine this was very disruptive, but however, that's how we managed. We also were given gas masks. We went and were measured for gas masks, and we always carried gas masks with us because the Germans had gas, and they had used it in the First World War, so the expectation was that they would use it in the Second World War. So we had gas masks. Everybody carried one. Well, then what happened, it became serious that Europe was falling. France fell. We had Dieppe, and the people, what they did was little fishing vessels, they knocked the little fishing vessels with people the captains who had these little boats. They were called the Seagulls, these boats, and they knocked them up at 2 o'clock in the morning because they had to go and get the men off the beaches to get them into the larger boats. We lost a lot of them. Because it was, the guns. So what happened though, what was interesting, was that a lot of people were saved because we always say that it was the Lord that did it. There was a fog that came over, and the pilots, the German pilots, couldn't see through what was going on. So a lot of men were killed, but a lot of men managed to get off. There were a lot of boats lost. Anyway, it deteriorated. My father's business was demolished in London. He had a publishing firm, and the machinery, he went up there, and the only way you could get through London was on the River Thames, and because all the roads were blocked from the debris on the road. And so what happened, he asked them, could they ease up on the water, and he said, no, because we have to save St. Paul's. And we have to get the fires out before they come back tonight, so they can't
see you.
That's right. So while this was going on, we had no defenses at all, really. There was nothing to stop them. And so my father everybody was concerned, and they decided that the children should be evacuated. And so, because my father said, look, to my mother, you have a child, you'll have enough to take care of yourself, and without having a child to take care of. And the instructions were, because he was in the Home Guard up on the Downs, he'd go up there every night waiting for the Germans to come, because they thought they would come in parachutes and drop down behind Brighton. And they had blown up the piers, they had mined beaches, they had barbed wire all along, and the 2 piers had been blown in 2 so that they couldn't dock any boats at the end of the pier. And so as things deteriorated, it was decided that the children should be moved up north. And so we went on trains. We were all gathered at a certain time up at the main station in Brighton, and there were all these trains with thousands of children everywhere. And we were allocated to go into a certain section, and the children went to different areas up north. We didn't all go to the same place. And so then when we arrived, we were in church, we were placed in a church. And then the locals would come and say, well, we will take this child into our home, and that's what happened. Well, in the meantime, I got what they call an 11+ scholarship, and I was moved from, Cowley near Keighley over to Holney near Holmfirth. This is all Yorkshire. And then I got two viruses together. It was chickenpox and measles together. I had both rashes, and that caused a lot of concern for my mother. And she said, "That's it." She said, "We'll come back. She will bring you back." And she said, "If we'll sleep in the same bed, and if we die together." And that was it. And so this is what we did. And so I came back, and I can remember going out one morning. We'd heard the bombs drop. We went to see where it had dropped, and sure enough, this high rise, it had come in at an angle and had hit the basement. Of course, people were in the basement. Mm-hmm. And so we felt a little secure from the bombs because we were close to the water, and the tendency was that they would jettison their bombs after they had crossed the water. In other words, they wanted to make sure they did some damage. They didn't jettison their bombs out in the channel. Mm-hmm. Once you start to drop it, it travels. It doesn't necessarily drop straight ahead. It travels a bit. Okay. And so we felt we were secure. But then we really got it when they returned. Once they were starting to be turned back from London, which was the fighter pilots in the Spitfires, once they started to turn them back, I mean, those Spitfire pilots were fantastic, just fantastic. Once they started to turn back, then they would jettison them anywhere. You see, they would just get rid of their bombs. They didn't care where they dropped. So anyway, well, that's what happened, and it was. I always feel that it was almost like the Lord working again. We see in the Bible how He did certain things to help the Israelites. And I honestly believe that when Hitler he called the astrologers in to see whether he should go to Russia or whether he should go to England. Mm. And what happened, the astrologers told him to go to Russia, which really saved England. So contrary to what happens now, I can remember that Churchill was a believer, and we know what he said, we'll fight in the beaches and in the trenches and so on, and all I can offer you is blood, sweat, toil, and tears. We know those quotes. Mm-hmm. But one of the things he was very strong about was the Bible. And he said, let them go, the skeptics who didn't believe in the Bible, he said, let them go dig, and they will find that they happen to people not unlike ourselves. Mm-hmm. In other words, this kind of thing has happened before. The Israelites were attacked and so on. But in this particular case, we feel that the Lord preserved us by telling him to go to Russia. Yeah. And so, and the king, I can remember him saying, I was a small child at the time, and I can remember lying in bed at 9 o'clock. They would play the national anthems of all the allies. Mm-hmm. And you'd hear the Stars and Stripes, you'd hear all of them, French resistance and so on, and the Canadians, they would just go and play them all at night time at 9 o'clock. And the king, I can remember him saying, it was devastating. People have no idea how terrible it was. Yeah. And what happened, he said, we will reach out our hand into the darkness, and he will lead us through. And I strongly believe the Lord, did lead us through. So, and then, of course, the war was over, and fortunately, but it's a reminder of just how terrible war can be.
Mm. Was it one of those things that once the war ended, everything kind of went back to normal, or did it take?
It took a long time because the rationing was very well. You see, the food was very short, and there was a lot of war damage. I mean, a lot. Coventry was destroyed. I mean, the cathedral was destroyed. All they saved was the cross. I mean, it was horrendous, the bombing that took place. Mm-hmm. And but Brighton wasn't so bad because, of course, we were close to the ocean, but nevertheless, there was the fear of invasion. Mm-hmm. The invasion, they really felt, there was local rumors that he would come to Brighton and Hove, and those were the two towns that were right there. That's where I lived. And so my father felt very much so that it was important that I would be out of the way, so that my mother, she had to run. Mm-hmm. She could run by herself. She didn't have to worry about a child. Mm-hmm. But people don't realize. I mean, it's removed here. When I tell you, one of the things that I don't understand is the violence that people find as entertainment. Mm-hmm. And oddly enough, my husband, while I was a child there, he was with the U.S. Army under General Patton. he was fighting in the Battle of the Bulge, going through a horrendous situation as well. So war is a terrible thing, really. So, we gradually got back to normal. We came back. I went back to school, the school that I went to the high school now, well, middle school, high school. I was sort of, and then of course it gradually went back to normal, right? But at the time, rationing, I can remember my grandmother. People would have a fit. My grandmother, who lived out in the country and raised chicken, and she would pluck and clean the chicken, send it through the mail. I mean, this was people talk about refrigeration and salmonella. I mean, the people in the country were the ones who were surviving well because they grew their own food, and so that was it. But I'll tell you this though, I don't regret having experienced it because it makes you very tolerant and it sorts your values out. You know what's important in life, and faith is number one in our house, and my husband's very strong in the faith as a result of all this, and I don't regret a thing, because when difficulties arrive or you don't feel that certain values. One of the things that really struck me when I came over here was the ease with which people throw out furniture and buy new furniture, and very quickly will re-rug, and they buy lots of clothes. I mean, at that time, you see, I was raised with rationing. You had to have points to buy clothes, and certainly food stamps. I mean, we were allowed 2 ounces of cheese a week.
Wow.
That's right. There was so much meat and so much. I mean, it was very frugal. But out of it, of course, we were healthy because there was sugar was rationed. Everything was rationed. And of course, what was interesting was that I can remember the rosehip syrup that we had, and they got the vitamin C. This was what I was so clever. In England, a lot of the roses grow wild, and rosehip syrup is rich in vitamin C. So they gathered the vitamin C from the roses, the bushes. I mean, this is what happens. It's very interesting how you manage to survive, But anyway, that's my story briefly in a nutshell.
Did you know exactly what was going on while it was happening?
Oh, yes.
Did you understand it all, being that young?
Yes, because you knew. I mean, I knew very well what was going on where we were living. And I mean, my father had been told that the Germans came, all the money and the meat was to be destroyed. In other words, there wasn't to be any food for the people who came in, which meant there wouldn't be any food for us. But nevertheless, they didn't want the army to have food, the attacking army, so to speak. And so all the money and the meat had to be destroyed. So we knew, and it was expected. And as I say, as a child, I remember very clearly them saying that he's supposed to come to Hove and Brighton because he likes Hove. Can you imagine Hove and Brighton are side by side on the ocean, or at least on the English Channel? And they said, well, Hitler likes Hove, so he'll come to Hove. And so this is how people would talk. But it's very interesting. Children have very funny thoughts. And we would talk about what we would do to Hitler if we could do something to him. And it was, hope he had a cut so we could put salt in it. I mean, really, can you imagine? This is a 10-year-old, and it was so, when I look back, the humor, it wasn't humor at the time, we were thinking, what could we do that really would hurt him? It was, if he was cut, we'd put salt in his wound. So that was it, but...
What was it like when you had gone over with all the other children?
Well, it was fine. We went up north, and oddly enough, up north they used to wear clogs. So I had to have a pair. They're wooden clogs. That's, life has changed so much. There was, you wouldn't see a pair of clogs now. But clogs were worn because they never wore out, and they were very supportive. So I had a pair of clogs, and this was... So that was new, and that was new, and the people were new, and of course they speak differently, up north, and so. But they were very good people, very fine people to take care of us. There's no question about that. But there again, something went very wrong when I obviously was deteriorating because to have the two viruses together, and when my mother got me back, and I was in a darkened room. Because they drew the blinds because they were afraid that I would lose my eyesight, because that is a side effect of measles. And since I had the two viruses together, there was considerable concern. And also another thing that got really messed up were teeth, because you couldn't have the amount of treatment as a child being evacuated. And when I came home, every Saturday morning I had to go to the dentist and have my teeth attended to.
Wow.
Which is not very nice, but anyway, that's what happened. You know, he found I needed some attention, but that's because I was evacuated. People don't look at you quite like your parents, you know, not really. And so,
Do you think there was a lot of kids who never made it back to their families?
I would be surprised if they didn't make it back to their families. There were other children who were being sent over to the United States. You know, they were probably the wealthier children and they knew where to send them to, but a lot of children were sent to the United States. And I can remember they wanted to send Princess Elizabeth, the Queen Mother right now. Oh no, the Queen right now. They wanted to send her over to the United States, and the Queen said, "Oh no." She said something like, "The King won't leave, and I won't leave without the King, and we won't let the children go without us, so we stay." And they stayed at Buckingham Palace, and every day when the bombs came, they would come out and go and look and see where everything had happened. I mean, they were an incredible family. Those are the parents of the current elderly Queen, an incredibly good woman. That's why everybody loves her. Because when she joined, and she would repair trucks, cars. That's what her job was. When she went to join the army, and she was repairing cars. So everybody was doing something, and people opened their homes for the wounded. The large homes became nursing homes and hospitals for the men returning. And I must say, I did see some photographs when the men returned from Japan. It was horrendous. They would show you photographs of how they were, and they were so emaciated when they came back. But they would come to Brighton because they had these huge hotels that they could house them to help them recover. This was at the end of the war. So I can remember that, these are memories that, in fact, what happened when we went to Europe, that's why I wanted the children, Hannah and her brother have both been to Belsen, because Dachau. We went to Dachau, and I just wanted them. We wanted them to understand what happened, and my husband and I went to Dieppe, and of course we took them to Normandy for them to see unless you see reality. You know, if you don't learn from history, you live to repeat it, and that's the expression they use. But so I seem to have chatted on.
I appreciate that. Thank you.